I wanted a place for people to receive authentic guidance and practical ways to awaken. Thought-provoking, paradigm-shifting, and empowering. This is about expanding our human consciousness to create a wave of new possibilities. I'm Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke, and this is Quantum Minds TV. Welcome to Quantum Minds TV, where we discuss and take a deep dive into various topics and various perspectives on what it's going to take to create a shift in human consciousness. Now, today on the show, I am honored to have Erich von Däniken joining me. During his early years and formative years, Erich immersed himself into ancient holy writings and unsolved archaeological puzzles. This led him to the realization that ancient astronauts or galactic travelers likely visited Earth and had contact with humans. And to validate his theories, Erich has traveled all over the world to explore ancient sacred sites and archaeological digs. Based on his findings, Erich has authored 40 books, including the international bestsellers Chariots of the Gods and The Mysteries of the Gods. And his books have sold over 72 million copies and been translated into 32 languages. And they've inspired 2 documentary films. Now, Erich's also been featured as a regular expert on History Channel's Ancient Aliens TV series. And Erich von Däniken has held countless lectures at public forums and educational institutions around the world. So welcome to Quantum Minds TV, Erich, and thank you so much for being my distinguished guest today. And wow, all I can say is those are some amazing accomplishments.
And don't forget one thing. In the meantime, I'm 87 years old, but amazing. I still function. My brain functions. So let's go on with the interview.
Okay. So, wow, I just want to, again, thank you for coming on, and what an amazing life you have had. And you really have pioneered this field of trying to really help people take seriously this notion that we have had ancient travelers from outer space come to this planet and that they have left their marks in the archaeology, in these ancient sites. And, that there is intelligent life here out in the universe and has come here and visited us. Now, I have some questions in terms of number one, what has fueled you to write so many books and to continue to work on this field and pioneer it and push the envelope throughout your lifetime, really? What's inspired you and fueled you to do so?
It was all because of my religious doubts. I was educated as a strict Catholic in a boarding school in Switzerland. And of course, I'm a deep believer in God. I still am a deep believer in God. I'm one of these figures who pray every day. But to my knowledge, when I was a boy, God had to be timeless. So a God who makes an experiment and has to wait what the result is couldn't be the real God. God has to be timeless. Now, in the Old Testament, we read that this so-called God descends to the planet Earth, descends to the Israelites, and it's described with smoke and fire and trembling and loud noise. It's also described that God moved the vehicle to move from one point to the other point. Now, in my optic, the real God is a spiritual being. He would not need a vehicle in which to move from one point to the other. So I simply had doubts in my own Catholic education, and I wanted to find out what other communities in the deep past say to their God, to their religion. That was all the starting point, doubts in religion.
Well, I love that, because I had my own doubts as I was growing up and, had been exposed to a lot of different spiritual and religious philosophies, but I ultimately went down the road of science and physics. And so I had these doubts, but I also had an intuitive sense that, yes, there is a God, there is some spiritual aspect to the universe, but it's not the way it's depicted in so many of the world's religions. And There was so much hypocrisy I found in, this religion calling that religion the evil ones, and wars fought in the name of God and so forth. And I thought, no, there's got to be something way beyond our human dramas here on this earth that is more intelligent, more benevolent, and more not so anthropomorphized, not so humanized. So I can definitely relate, and I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper later in the conversation about that exact topic. But first, I want to come back to your experience in pioneering this field and really pushing that envelope for so long. So I love that it was driven not just by doubt, but also there's this sense that there is, a spiritual existence beyond what we, often think of as in the religious text. But as a pioneer, I'm sure you have also hit up against a number of resistances or naysayers and people who would call it like a pseudo science or pseudo research. Or what has been your way of dealing with this and continuing to move forward without letting it deter you?
When you are active in public, you might be a politician, you might be a writer, it doesn't matter. Soon as you are active in public, you are criticized. This is completely normal. Some people find you wonderful. They say, hey, he's a nice guy, he's intelligent. And the other people say, no, he's an idiot. He's simply dumb. But I made the experience that all these people who think my theories are nonsense, they have never read one of my books. Neither were they ever in a speech of mine. Because all these people who read at least one of my books, they become very, very stubborn. They ask the questions. They simply have the same question as I. So if you read some of my books, or at least you are one of my speech, you are not an adversary anymore, or maybe still a critic, which is absolutely normal in our society. The critics have good arguments, and it's not so that always the critics are unright. Sometimes the critics are right, and we have to learn from them.
That's a great point. I mean, it's like it keeps us honest, right? And it's that challenge that makes us really dig deeper to think more deeply. And I think that that's something that the world as a whole could really take that perspective of, hey, the critics, they're not always wrong, they're not always right. I mean, sometimes they're right and we need to listen to them. And other times they need to be opened up and listen to us, but actually read, actually not just dismiss it offhand, because I as a scientist who've gone into the more metaphysical realm have also been labeled as a pseudoscientist, and people would try to discredit. But I have found often that when they're stuck in their own dogma, whether it's a materialist dogma, a religious dogma, a scientific dogma, when they're stuck in that dogma and they base their whole worldview on it, it's almost like they have to discredit anything that contradicts or would create a different worldview and cause them to have to reevaluate everything that they know in life. So it's easier to just try and discredit it and dismiss it offhand without really exploring into it. So I love how you point out that these critics, yeah, we need to listen to them, but let's have an intelligent conversation and actually, consider each other's points versus just dismiss offhand.
There are some of the arguments which are hard to deny for the critics. For example, every culture on this planet has a calendar. And the starting point for the calendar is for the culture something very, very important. Mm-hmm. We Christians, we live in the Christian calendar, and the starting point was the birth of Jesus Christ. But the Muslim live in another calendar, and the starting point was because Muhammad, the prophet, went to Medina. Or the Jewish community has another calendar again. The starting point is more than 5,000 years in the past. It was the creation of the earth. Now, the Maya, the culture of the Maya in Central America, of course, they had also their own calendar. And also they have a starting point. The starting point was August 14th, 3111 BC. So why why have they started their calendar? What was so important? Now the Maya have left at least a few of some books. The biggest part are destroyed. And in the fourth book of the Chilambayam, you can read why they started on August 11, 3014. Because on that day, the gods from the firmament visited the planet Earth. And they even say the gods spoke the magical language of the stars. And when they will return in the far future, they will reorder what they have done. So the reason for the starting point of the Maya calendar was the visit of extraterrestrials. So you cannot deny this. What can you do against it?
I love that. And it's such a clear sign of how humans tend to start their calendar or their dating system according to some significant event that helped kick off that particular tradition. And yet that calendar system is very much a human construct. Yes, we have a flow of time and an experience of that, but it's very relative experience in that flow of time. And I would imagine that any extraterrestrials that ever came, any galactic visitors that came, they had a completely different way of tracking time as well. And have you ever found any evidence of that in any of the sites or archaeological research that you have done in terms of a different type of calendar that was almost seemed off-world?
Yes, the Maya calendar in Central America is very, very complicated. The Maya worked with two calendars at the same time. One calendar was like our calendar, 365 days. The other calendar had only 260 days. So 260-day calendar makes absolutely no sense on our planet. There is never summer or winter or whatever. Everything is wrong. Why 260-day calendar? Because they say it was the calendar of the gods.
Well, and I've also heard that the Mayan calendar, there's another level of it where it was almost more about galactic cycles, our rotation of our solar system around the galactic core of the Milky Way versus just our Earth rotating around the sun. So that would definitely depict, that how would we know that information if we didn't have some kind of off-world knowledge of the stars and the flow and cycle of the galaxy?
And now the so-called gods, the extraterrestrials, they give informations to us humans. And in some of the old writings, you can still read some of this information. For example, there was a young man thousands of years ago before the Great Flood. His name is Enoch. And Enoch, he writes in his own book in the first person, he was taken away by these guardians of the sky. Now, they teach him their language. They teach him in astronomy. They teach him in different sciences. And then one of the so-called teachers says to young Enoch, human, look out there. Do you see this little light out there? You humans, you call it moon. But the moon has no light by itself. The moon receives its light from the sun. And then he explains why the moon sometimes is full and half and empty, etc. Now, this is a scientific information. You see, the moon receives his light from the sun, a scientific information which no Stone Age people before the Great Flood could have known. Yeah. So because of such information, we know there must have been a scientific knowledge behind it.
So, Erich, you mentioned Enoch and the vision that he had and how it was such a revelation to him, and that he was probably taken up into some spaceship and shown this view of Earth and the moon and so forth, and being educated around these things in a more scientific way. And this actually, the shift, the transformation that it had upon him is very similar to something that many astronauts today talk about, which is when they go for the first time, especially, and they go out into outer space and they see Earth from this view in outer space, not just from an image or, a TV imagery of that planet, but actually with their own eyes, directly seeing Earth from outer space, it creates an epiphany within them. It creates this realization that this Earth is precious, that we humans all share this same planet, and it is a beautiful garden, but it's fragile at the same time, and that we humans, we have a responsibility to become the tenders, the caretakers of this planet, the caretakers of the garden, rather than just pillage and destroy and deplete the resources. And so this shift, they actually call it the overview effect. When, the astronauts or whoever goes out into space and sees our planet and its beauty, but also its fragility, and they see it from outer space, they get this overview effect of seeing that we are all one, that we are all part of a whole. And in fact, Edgar Mitchell, it completely transformed his life. He was one of the astronauts from the Apollo missions. And when he came back, he was so moved by this effect, this vision that he had while he was in outer space looking at the Earth, that he then went on to found and help create the Noetic Science Institute, and which has helped to advance the studies, scientific studies on consciousness. And later that led into the IONS, the International Society for Noetic Science. And they talk often about something called the noosphere, or the morphogenetic field, this oneness field, this field of consciousness that humans share, and not just humans, but all beings of this earth are part of a sphere, a noosphere, or a morphogenetic field that connects all of us, that we truly are all connected to just one mind. We all share one mind, and therefore we are not separate. We are a collective. And this shift in consciousness these astronauts have experienced, or that these prophets who were taken up into the spaceships potentially have experienced, this kind of a shift in awareness to recognizing our oneness. And that is one of the key things that can really help us humans to make that leap that we need to make in order to accomplish our next level of evolution and become these galactic humans. If these ancient aliens came to the planet and they had the ability to travel through space and time and visit other worlds, obviously they had very advanced technology, and they would have brought some level of that technology. And we have maybe in our pictographs, our hieroglyphs, and so forth, there's depictions of some of this technology. But what level of that technology do you think was actually taught to humans by them, or any level of understanding that we might have had at one point in the ancient past?
The distances between the stars are, as we all know, very, very big. We count them in light years. And today, we humans, we have absolutely no technology to move in these distances. So we have no idea. And some 40 years ago, I discussed the same problem with Dr. Wernher von Braun, the one who shot Saturn V up to the moon. And I said, with what speed, what technology have they traveled us? And he said to me, Erich, we have enough information that they were here. So the problem of transportation was their problem. We can solve it. It was their problem, how we did it. Now, what do we know? What technologies we have, maybe 500 years in the future? We really have no idea. Now, in the past, these extraterrestrials, they helped, of course, some of the humans. They took some of the young boys up to their, what I call the spaceship, the mother spaceship, and they teach them not only Enoch, there were others too. And some of these young people, when they were back on the planet Earth, they wrote books about it, including in ancient India. There we had a guy with the name of Arjuna. He was taken up there, like Enoch, and he came back. And of course, he wrote about his experience. And he told what they taught him, what they taught him about technology, about engineering, about moving stones, about creating temple. And also they promised to him that in a far, far future, they will return to this planet. And this promise of returning is a fact in every culture. I mean, we are educated as Christians. We believe that one day Jesus will return. But the Jewish community believe that one day their Messiah will return. Or the Muslim community believe that one day that Mahdi will return. So this hope of returning is part of every religion. Mm-hmm. Now, in reality, I think it was a promise of the extraterrestrials.
Now, one of the things that I think is very important to assert here and to just use to help, reassure people is we're not trying to say by any means that there is no God. In this conversation, we are saying that many of the ancient religions that have deified certain beings and called them gods, maybe that was because from their perspective as humans, what these beings could accomplish was so great and so beyond what we humans understood that it seemed magical or godlike or divine in some way. And at the same time, just because we're saying that maybe the religious notions of certain beings, certain prophets, certain deities and so forth, the various ancient pantheons, maybe these were ancient aliens that were traveling to Earth. And yet also, that does not negate that there is a spiritual side to the universe, that there is an essence and an intelligence and a conscious, intentional source or drive that brought forth creation, whether we call that from the Big Bang or, the development of the human, not necessarily from a physical level, but from a spiritual level. And was it only at the beginning? Or is that presence, that divine intelligent source, here still? And I would say that from a perspective of physics, we look at, for example, today, something called dark energy. Scientists are realizing that there is some form of a force that's coming out uniformly from everywhere in space that is pushing out the expansion of our universe at an accelerated rate. And for me, as a Kabbalist, as well as a metaphysician, in addition to a scientist, I believe that force that is creating that expansion and accelerating the growth and the outward movement of our universe is actually the will of that divine source that is coming in from every point in space, from the quantum field, from the 0 point energy field of the vacuum, and pushing that will out for the acceleration. It's bringing energy in from a spiritual source beyond into our physical universe to keep pushing the envelope of light, to keep the process of creation moving outwards and expanding ever more. So very much there is a source that is still here, and it has an intelligence, it has a will, it has an intention for life and light to thrive within our universe, for order, higher levels of order and development to come. And this counteracts that physics notion of entropy, where everything should just, fall into disarray, and yet it doesn't. We've had billions of years, and yet we still have order and structure and a certain flow to our universe.
We'd now like you to enjoy a consciousness break with the talented artist Jaguar Twin.
Every time I see it different. Every time. Back long ago, I was just me, but who was I to know? I wanted to see myself and where I could go. I spoke the words, one become two, then I was in reverse, but now I could see myself, and I became you. Well, you and I could dance forever, darkness and a light, but when we crashed and came together, a sun was born inside.
do you think that these extraterrestrials were all the same group of extraterrestrials or different groups that are all promising to return? Or do you think it's one group that was promising to return?
I really don't know. I think we have been visited not only once, at least 2 or 3 times. And I really don't know how they looked like. They must have looked similar to us, which is, by the way, not a controversy. We know evolution on every planet goes completely different. So to assume that extraterrestrials would look like us is from the beginning ridiculous. They should look completely different. But they told us, they told our forefathers, we created you on our own image. Right. The so-called gods created us. So that does not controverse evolution. Of course, we are part of evolution, but the starting point of evolution was not coincidence. The information was already coming from outside.
Oh, one of the things that I would like to share from the perspective of a scientist, and this is something that I talk about in season 1 of Mystery Teachings on Gaia TV, which is the probability for the existence of extraterrestrial life or intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, purely based on the science and the statistics of what's out there in the universe. Now, our universe really, truly is finely tuned for the development of life. And it's likely that life is actually very abundant in the universe. Even if just one of the fundamental constants that governs the laws and particle interactions of our universe, even if just one of those was slightly different, life as we know it, and even the formation of the planets and stars would not have been able to develop. Now, current estimates say that our sun, that is the center of our solar system, is just one out of about 100 billion stars in just the Milky Way galaxy. And about 7 to 10% of those stars are similar to our sun and have at least one planet orbiting them. And of those, the number that have potentially habitable conditions that are similar to Earth range anywhere from 1.9 billion up to 40 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy alone. Now, that is incredible statistics. And right now, we're just talking about our galaxy. Now, in addition to this, the universe is estimated to contain nearly 2 trillion galaxies. And if even just 1% of those galaxies was anything like ours, that means that there could be 20 billion galaxies that each host billions of Earth-like planets. That's incredible. So that brings the amount of potential Earth-like planets in our universe to staggering numbers. And the odds are that there is life beyond Earth, and that those odds are extremely high. Now, scientists like to talk about something called the Goldilocks zone, which is the place in various solar systems or orbiting suns where a planet has the conditions for life as we know it that are very similar, that they're just right. Goldilocks having the just right distance from their star, the just right amount of other planets to stabilize its orbit, the just right distance from the center of the galaxy, and so forth. So assuming, this is assuming though, these Goldilocks zones is assuming that life elsewhere in the universe needs to be like how it is here on Earth. And that is a big assumption. It's possible that life could be very abundant all throughout even our solar system, let alone the galaxies and the universe, because there could be life forms that are way different from what we know of here on Earth, and maybe also at different dimensions, maybe not even in this physical reality and density that we know, but at higher vibrational levels. So the probability of life in the universe is truly abundant. But if we were to just go with this idea of the Goldilocks zone, about 75% of these other Goldilocks planets on average, are also 1 to 2 billion years older than our Earth. Some are even as much as 6 billion years older. And that gives significantly more time for the development of life and consciousness on those planets. So this means that Earth is relatively young when it comes to the cosmic scale. And that means also that that life that is probably out there in the universe has had a lot more time on other planets, millennia ahead of us, to evolve, to advance, to develop their technologies, to develop their consciousness and their understanding of themselves, science, their place in the universe, and how to probably bend space and time. So we could say that it's actually highly improbable that we humans are the only intelligent life in the universe or even our galaxy. And we could say it's highly probable that there is life out there in the universe and that that life has been able to evolve to such a level where it has the technological ability and awareness to be able to travel beyond their planet, beyond their star system, even throughout the galaxy, and travel the universe.
This Conscious Conversation was created, produced, and recorded by Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke in collaboration with Erich von Däniken and edited by Verse Content and HH Films and Photo. The theme music was created by Tim Mountain of Even Load Productions. Quantum Minds TV is a product of the Quantum Learning Academy.